Yeah, definitely. So just to kind of wrap things up, the last topic I'd really like to dive into in a little bit more detail is around AI and automation. I know you've been doing quite a bit more recently around that kind of automation and some of the new technologies coming into the market. It was interesting what you were saying about scoping, intake, requirements generation. I mean, I think what I was going to ask you was, where do you think companies can most effectively leverage AI? If it depends what type of AI you're utilizing. If you're utilizing machine learning, then the kind of quantitative analysis, there's a massive amount you can do with that, which is really, really interesting. But the large language models have changed the game completely. And the crazy thing is, it's only really within the last 9 months that it's really come out into the market. And I was listening to a podcast the other day, fairly technical podcast, which was kind of going a bit beyond my capabilities in terms of the AI conversation. But it was really interesting to understand how these current large language models, they came from stuff that people didn't really expect to work in the way that they do. It was almost a surprise for the organizations that were really at the tip of the spear with this as to how effective they've been. So it's like people have been building up and building and building up to this for 20 plus years. And then suddenly there's a really effective opportunity. But one of the so scoping is brilliant for using those large language models where you've got this massive amount of information, and if you can guide those tools in the right way, if you can interface with them in the right way to explain the context by which you need that information, they're actually very good at providing that. But another area that I think is quite interesting is things around qualitative feedback. So, for example, if you look at the way that Bing is using, Bing Chat or whatever it's called now, at the top of the search results on Bing, where they've got the Chat GPT interface in the background, that kind of summarization has some real potential within, for example, qualitative feedback. You get lots of different feedback from lots of different people on how a supplier has performed. What you actually want is a summary of that somebody can read. Where do you see the opportunities for organizations to really leverage AI at the moment?
Yeah, and I think you're spot on with regards to generative AI, right? And it is almost a landslide, right, for a lot of organizations which have been working on these large language models to realize how powerful they've actually become as well, to enable organizations now with capabilities which are cognitive, right, and to many ends as well, creative to some degree, right? I think it almost begs the question then what creativity really then is, right? But these new capabilities are actually opening up opportunities, besides the fact that you can maybe specify your needs a bit better because you have an interaction dialogue with an agent, if you want, or the co-pilots or the chat GPTs of the world, right? You have an ability maybe as well to support your tendering activities by building up tenders for your suppliers in a much more rapid way, but then as well evaluate the results around criteria which you ask the machine then to summarize for or to watch out for and then bring back into evaluation, right? So what I see is that these solutions will have an ability on one hand to help you with a lot of consolidation of data, right? And with that, making sense out of the data which is out there, and that could be very extensive amounts and volumes of data, right? One of the organizations I'm recently been working with is actually looking at consolidating details out of audit reports, right? Which they need for compliance. And these audit reports, they are 80 to 90 PDF pages, right? And so doing a summarization of these activities to get to the grain of what is actually included in there and therefore relevant for me to then take next actions with my suppliers is super extensive work, right? And takes you almost 2 hours to do that for one single report. And nowadays, with the capabilities you have around generative AI, this is taking them 5 minutes, because the only thing they need to do is revise what has been summarized and it makes sense, or whether there may be something missing, which is basically a validation point rather than a summarization activity, right? So just taking that as an example, in that particular case, with more than 2,000 of these reports crossing the table of individual people in the supplier quality function every year, you can imagine that 2,000, 2 hours, right? That gives you already quite an amount of savings with regards to productivity, right? And it gives you an ability to tap into details which you potentially would oversee, because this is the good thing as well about the generative AI solutions. They may actually come up with details which you may not emphasize on because you're focused on trying to identify the data points which you've always been looking at, right? So again, one big area, consolidation of details, sentiment analysis, so understanding what is actually underneath that detailed level of text, images, videos, depending on the media you're actually looking at, and reading between the lines and helping you understand the emotional aspects as well.